The Trans-Canada Trail is the longest network of its kind in the world. It goes from Newfoundland and Labrador's Atlantic coast to Vancouver Island and up to the Beaufort Sea. And during COVID, hikers have trekked it as never before. With us now for more, in Windsor, Ontario, Eleanor McMahon, President and CEO of the Trans-Canada Trail, former Ontario Cabinet Minister to boot, and always a friend of this program. And Ms. McMahon, it is a delight to welcome you back. How are you doing?
I'm thrilled to be here, Steve. Thank you very much. I'm well. Thank you very much. I had a walk on the trail this morning, so there's no better way to start the day.
Ah, terrific. What part of the trail? Tell us.
So I'm in Windsor, as you mentioned, at where I grew up, and I'm staying with my mom for the Thanksgiving time. And I was out on the Ganacho Trail this morning, which is part of the trail network that you just mentioned, the 28,000 kilometer Trans-Canada Trail. And so if I stand at the end of my mom's street, where I was this morning with my lovely dog, exercising and getting some fresh air and enjoying the contemplative early morning, it means that I'm standing on the trail, likely with hundreds of thousands of Canadians right across this country at the same time, which is pretty neat.
You did a little wee smidge of it, but let's show the whole thing now, shall we?
Sure.
Sheldon, if you would, bring up this graphic. Now, for those who are listening on podcast and can't see this, this is a very long line I am about to describe. The Trans-Canada Trail, longest multi-use recreational trail network in the world, 28,000 kilometers through every province and territory. It runs coast to coast to coast from Cape Spear in Newfoundland and Labrador, all the way out west to Victoria, British Columbia. And then if you consider the north-south axis, it's Tuktoyaktuk in the Northwest Territories to where Eleanor McMahon is right now in Windsor, Ontario. 80% of Canadians live within a half an hour of a trail section. And here in the province of Ontario, we've got 6,000 kilometers of trails as part of this network. Let's go back, Eleanor, 30 years, because I think the trail's history and the guys who put it together go back a few decades. How did it all start?
Well, you know, like any great Canadian project, the trail has been a combination of ingenuity, innovation, vision, you know, that opportunity to take an idea and crystallize it and tap into Canadians' emotive desire to love their country and see it as something bigger than themselves. I think all of those things were part of the vision, and I've never met them. So the two gentlemen that really conceived of the trail, Bill Pratt, who's from Calgary, and Dr. Pierre Camus, who was originally from Montreal and now lives in Ottawa. He's quite elderly now. But the two of them conceived of this as part of the 125th anniversary celebrations of our country back in 1992. And the idea of the Trans-Canada Trail has been galvanizing Canadians ever since as an opportunity to connect our country via existing trading routes, via the voyageur, whether you're on the waters of Lake Superior, and really just that emotive, imaginative, aspirational idea. And of course, in 2017, as part of the sesquicentennial, the Trans-Canada Trail reached a national dream of connection end to end to end, and taking all of that Trail of Trails idea and connecting it into the longest network in the world, as you mentioned.
Okay, a couple things to follow up on there, because obviously
Sure.
this didn't start as one continuous trail. It was how many different trails that eventually got connected together?
Well, it was over 400, but now it's over 5.
Over
because
500,
the trail, we say that the trail is connected, but it's not complete. And that's because it continues to grow, both in dimension and in length. And those local spurs are really important. We say that the trail is national in scope and local in execution for a reason. It's because whether you're in Windsor or in Victoria or Tuktoyaktuk, as you mentioned, or when we had our national board meeting in Ottawa last weekend, you're in the Gatineau Hills, you get to meet the people who actually make the trail happen at a local level. And we have over 500 relationships with trail groups across Canada that really fortify and edify what the trail has become. These are volunteers who often work in their spare time to bring the trails to life in their community. And those people really are the heart and beating soul, the beating heart and soul, of the Trans-Canada Trail right across the country.
And is it absolutely 100% totally continuous?
It is.
Really?
Yep.
So it starts in Newfoundland and Labrador. You could start there and you could literally keep going on that trail, no interruptions, all the way to Victoria.
Well, that's really kind of one of the most amazing things about it. One of the originators and most passionate Canadians about the trail, Valerie Pringle. Many Canadians will know Valerie from her broadcast career. You know her.
Absolutely.
And she's been a volunteer and leader on our board. She's just stepping off after many, many years of service. But her passion for the trail emanates from that idea. She told a story recently about being with a group of Canadian school children where she said to them, I believe she was in Peterborough, if you left your schoolyard right now and turned right, you could end up in Cape Spear, Newfoundland. If you turned left, you could end up in Victoria. If you went north, you could emanate and be in Tuktoyaktuk. And whether you see those touch points as the start of the trail or the end of the trail, the imaginative beauty of that is that you can be on either coast of this country and connect with someone who's standing on the Trans-Canada Trail and could be thousands and thousands of kilometers away from you. The vastness of this country is connected by the Trans-Canada Trail. And it's really, again, an emotive and imaginative and aspirational idea that continues to flourish. And of course, the pandemic has really seen a vigorous uptake by Canadians of trail use. And the good news is our data tells us it's going to continue.
I noticed that because I saw a recent Leger survey the other day which showed that trail use is up 40% year over year. What do you attribute that to?
Well, we wanted to go beyond the anecdotal, but our trail groups are telling us that they're seeing more people out than ever. I'm seeing it. I saw it just this morning. I saw it all weekend. As Canadians are outdoors, I think the pandemic and its social isolation has driven people outside where they feel safer, where there's an opportunity to connect. And I think that word connect has had a powerful impetus during the pandemic as people think about how the social order has changed. The pandemic has had profound implications on us all, be they tragic implications, mental health implications, isolated seniors, isolated Canadians of all ages, and being outside and on the trail really has been the healing factor for them. And that's what's showing up in our data too. So not only are they using trails more, but 95% of Canadians in that same survey said that mental health and enhancing their mental health, an equal measure to those saying their physical health, by the way, is really what got them out their front door with their shoes on. And that's the other nice part of the trail, about trails, and the Trans-Canada Trail in particular, is that you don't need a lot of equipment. You know, in Canada, we say there's no bad weather, only bad clothing. And so if you have a warm coat in the wintertime and a hat and a pair of gloves and some decent walking shoes, you can go pretty much anywhere. And that's the beauty of the trail too, because there's an equal measure of that speaks to the equity and the importance of getting outside. And as Canadians were driven indoors, unfortunately, and more isolated, many of us found ourselves, especially if we live in a densely populated urban environment, in our box, sometimes in the sky, with no backyard. And so the desire to get outside, because we were living and working in the same environment, became that much more pronounced. So getting outside, connecting to nature, we know that it has positive mental health benefits. We did a campaign with CAMH last year at the onset of winter because we knew what was coming. And we knew that Canadians would profoundly feel the encroaching and oncoming darkness and isolation. And we were concerned about their mental health. And it turns out a lot of people were as well. So our Applause to Oz campaign featured leading Canadians across the country, mayors, Olympic athletes, doing a social media campaign with CAMH and us to talk about those mental health benefits. And I'm seeing that more every day myself as I get out on the trail. And anecdotally, I'm seeing more people. It's allowed me to meet people in my neighborhood that I otherwise would not have met. And I think Canadians are rediscovering their communities, their connections, there's that word again, to each other and to the world around them and to nature, which is also pervasive. Canadians love the great outdoors, and they love to find opportunities to connect to that nature in their backyard, down the street, around the corner, across town, on their bicycle, or with their walking shoes. And that's what the trail does.
I totally get the physical and mental health aspects. They sort of speak for themselves. But what about economic health? Does the trail contribute to the country's economic health in any way?
Well, that's the other interesting thing. We did a study with the Conference Board of Canada last fall that underscored not only the existing but potential economic drivers that really speak to the trail's ecosystem impact. What I mean by that is the trail is a conveyor of people, again, to each other, to their communities, but also from a tourism perspective. I had the privilege of being the tourism minister in Ontario. And what I saw there was a sector that whose vibrancy really is about those local experiences. And that has been underscored by the pandemic too. We're seeing Destination Canada turn itself inside out from becoming that agency of the federal government that marketed Canada to the world to now marketing Canada to Canadians. And so those staycation opportunities that have arisen as a consequence of people's concerns about traveling, and in point of fact, public health has told us that we shouldn't and can't go far. And so people are rediscovering their own backyards and looking at the joys of that. And right along the trail, wherever you are, whether it's in Collingwood or Canmore, are local businesses that speak to the local food, the local craft brewery, the local wineries. And these businesses are often contiguous alongside the trail. And people's opportunity to go visit them is really going to be what sustains the tourism sector in the longer term. This is an emerging idea. It's actually not a new idea, but it's been given impetus because of the pandemic as small businesses have struggled and Canadians are being urged to go local and visit local and support their local small businesses. And many of those are restaurants and attractions right in their own communities. So the trail is what conveys people to and fro those connections, brings them to those beautiful global assets, whether it be Niagara Falls or Banff National Park, and alongside all those wonderful small businesses that really could use the injection of feet on the street and people walking in and buying a meal and spending time. And that's what's going to help power our economy and its return to health.
Having said that, I want to ask you about how concerned you are about climate change, because obviously there are a lot of fires, more now, it seems, than ever before. There are tornadoes, there are hurricanes, there's all sorts of environmental damage happening in this country right now. And I'm sure the trail can't be exempt from that. What kind of damage has the trail sustained as a result of climate change?
Yeah, absolutely. The trail continues to be damaged by our changing climate. We see that whether we're in Nova Scotia, on the Atlantic Ocean, we see that in the forest fires that have raged across the western provinces in particular and in northern Ontario. And, you know, the trail really is, in addition to being a conveyor of people to each other and to nature, it is a place of reconciliation. Our Indigenous partnerships are incredibly valuable and important to us. We are enriched by them. But we see in those, through that guardianship lens that our Indigenous partners bring, opportunities to renew the land, make sure that we're taking care of Mother Nature, but also that when these forest fires occur, it's certainly about building back better, but it's also about ensuring that the trail remains robust. The trail, since 1992 and since it was conceived, has enjoyed close to $100 million of government support, most of it federal, but we're fortunate to have tremendous provincial and municipal partners. And dare I say, Steve, because we just had an election, probably important to mention that we were in the platforms of two of the political parties, the Progressive Conservative Party of Canada and the Liberal Party.
Not Progressive anymore. I hasten it. It's just the Conservative Party now.
Forgive me. The Conservative Party of Canada. Forgive me. I know it's CPC, but I didn't want to use the acronym. Forgive me. Thank you, Steve. And the Liberal Party of Canada, both of whom had the trail in their platform. And I think that's a reflection of the fact that the trail enjoys broad-based support by Canadians from coast to coast to coast, that politicians see the importance of the trail, and in the context of climate change, understand that investing in the trail now, continuing to ensure that the asset that we steward remains robust, especially in the context of our changing climate. So we are definitely seeing the trail erode and be severely impacted, and that's not going to change. We know that climate change is here. I would say on a very positive note, however, that the conservation aspects relative to the trail are important for enhancing our biodiversity. Right now, the world is at the Convention on Biodiversity, and there's a big meeting in China in the spring where the global partners are going to gather to talk about protecting 30% of the world's landmass and oceans by 2030, and the imperative of that, and ensuring that we have less of a threat in terms of our endangered species. And trails are an important opportunity to create the kind of connection for wildlife and preservation and conservation that's going to ensure that we meet our 30 by 30 commitments, and we are a vehicle for, again, mitigating that changing climate. And so there's a positive story that we can tell about robust nature conservation, and on the other hand, making sure that we continue to protect and preserve the trail given the impacts of climate change.
Okay, a few minutes to go here, Eleanor, and I want to see if I can get two more items on the table here. Number one, I mean, obviously you can run on it, you can snowshoe on it, you can cross-country ski on it, you can cycle on parts of it, but I want to know what's kosher and what's not. Can you snowmobile on it, or can you motorcycle on it, or those kinds of things?
There are areas of the country where motorized use is allowed. And it depends which province you're in, because transportation tends to be a provincial responsibility. And so as stewards of the trail, we try to be a good partner to government wherever we are. So, for example, we have done surveys and through our partners at Leger in different provinces in the country that demonstrate that Canadians want non-motorized access, excuse me, to be predominant. And that doesn't mean that we exclude that the other, but it means that politicians and policymakers need to know and understand that Canadians in their part of the world, and again, this is a provincial responsibility, have a preference, and that preference is non-motorized transportation. So it's difficult because it sounds like we're favoring one to the exclusion of the other. But having spent some time doing bicycle and active transportation public policy work, as you know, there's a way for us to find accommodations for both. And again, that is based on which province of the country that you're in. We just ask that policymakers give due consideration to that non-motorized contingent as much as they may consider opportunities for snowmobiling and other motorized transportation, because we are certainly aware of the importance of that economic impact.
Okay, and let's get this in, because we're still a couple of weeks to go in the second annual Great Canadian Hike, which is September 15th to the end of October. Just give us a bit of flavor of what that's all about.
Well, we started this event last year during a global pandemic because we saw what you and I talked about earlier, which was growing use of trail across the country. And we wanted to give Canadians that opportunity in October during Thanksgiving as we gather together. And since that connection had been disrupted, we thought, wouldn't it be neat to give them that opportunity to gather safely outdoors? So even though last year, Steve, when we started this pandemic, and certainly there are still constraints in terms of indoor gatherings, but outdoors, the ability to gather is a lot easier. So is there an opportunity for us to encourage Canadians to gather outdoors, to log their kilometers on the trail, be it cycling or walking or paddling, and bring awareness to that and joy to that, certainly, and enter contests. We've got some wonderful sponsors that we've lined up. And again, this just underscores what we're seeing more and more, that Canadians are finding opportunities to have immersive conversations, to gather and to connect, because that physical connection has been missing, but they're finding it on the trail. And for us, for those of us that steward the trail, it's such an enormous privilege to see that happening and to realize that more and more Canadians are doing so. And the exciting thing for us is that 72% of Canadians in our polling are saying that, yes, I've used trails more often. Some of those are new trail users, which is really exciting. And I'm going to continue doing it, is what they told us, after the pandemic, if we see an end to this, which we hope we all will soon, Steve. And 25% of those Canadians said, we're going to use trails even more now. So this has whetted their appetite, and perhaps it's the silver lining to a very dark cloud, that they found an opportunity to gather outdoors, to be closer to nature and to each other. And that connective fascia that the trail represents has really seen a real moment in time now. And our job is to ensure that that momentum continues.
That's former Ontario Cabinet Minister Eleanor McMahon, the President, CEO of Trans Canada Trail. So nice to have you on the agenda again, Eleanor. You take care, and
And
Get
you.
out there and enjoy that trail some more.
I will. Thank you, Steve. You too. Take care.
The Agenda with Steve Paikin is made possible through generous philanthropic contributions from viewers like you. Thank you for supporting TVO's journalism.